Mariana had always been a strong woman. A black, hard-working fighter, she worked as a domestic servant for a wealthy family that never respected her. Her employers, Mrs. Claudia and Mr. Augusto, treated her like an object, someone who should always be at their disposal. From an early age, Mariana learned to swallow her pride and endure the weight of injustice, knowing that finding a job in the big city was not easy, especially for a black and poor woman like her. The house where she worked was immense, luxurious, and filled with artwork, worth more than she earned in an entire year. Yet she felt invisible, reduced to a ghost that only cleaned, cooked, and obeyed. Every morning her day began before anyone in the house even woke up. She prepared a flawless breakfast for her employers, and when they finally got up, she rarely received a good morning. The only thing she ever heard were complaints. The coffee is cold, the bread is hard, this juice doesn't taste the way I like. The couple's children, already adults and spoiled, were even worse. Mariana endured insults and racist jokes daily. They mocked her appearance, ridiculed her way of speaking, and made a point of belittling any effort she made to please them. More than once, they deliberately spilled juice on the floor just to watch her kneel and clean it up. When they returned from parties, they left their expensive clothes scattered on the floor, stained with drinks and makeup, demanding that they be spotless by morning. If anything went even slightly wrong, Mariana was the one to blame. Mrs. Claudia was no better. She constantly criticized Mariana's work, always finding a flaw, always belittling her. "You're too slow. I've never seen anyone so clumsy. If you keep this up, I'll have to find someone more competent." It was as if Mariana was always on the verge of being replaced, even though she knew she was efficient and dedicated. Mr. Augusto, on the other hand, ignored her existence completely. To him, Mariana was nothing more than a part of the house's scenery, something that was there to serve them, nothing more. Days passed, and the humiliation was constant. Mariana tried to stay strong, but with every look of disdain, with every cruel word, she felt smaller. Her meager salary was mostly sent to support her family in the countryside, leaving her with little for herself. While her employers dined on gourmet meals, Mariana ate scraps in the kitchen. When she got sick, she had to keep working because she knew that if she stayed in bed, she risked being fired without a second thought. Living like that was suffocating. Mariana felt trapped with no way out. Until one day, desperation took hold of her heart, and she started wondering if there was even a reason to keep fighting. The emotional and physical exhaustion had drained the light from her eyes, and she questioned whether her life could ever be different. Years went by, and Mariana felt the weight she carried growing heavier. The excessive work and constant humiliation suffocated her. No matter how hard she tried to hold on to hope, discouragement consumed her little by little. She had no life of her own, no dreams, and even less time for herself. What had once been a necessity had become a prison without bars, one from which she saw no escape. Every day was the same, waking up before sunrise, preparing breakfast, cleaning the house, enduring insults, obeying absurd orders, and falling, asleep exhausted, only to start all over again the next day. Mariana wondered if this would be her fate forever. She couldn't even remember the last time she had truly smiled, the last time she had felt genuine happiness. The pain kept building up, the disdain from her employers, the cruel laughter from their children, the extreme exhaustion. It all became an unbearable burden. Mariana started to feel like her life was worthless. No one saw her as a human being, no one cared about her well-being. She was just a servant, a nameless, faceless piece in that luxurious and cold environment. Then came a particularly difficult night when Mariana reached her breaking point. After a day filled with insults and disregard, she locked herself in her tiny, lifeless room and looked around. That cramped, soulless space reflected exactly how she felt inside. Small, insignificant, hopeless. Her heart felt heavy, her breathing unsteady. The sobs came hard, uncontrollable, and with them a terrifying thought. If I disappear, no one will notice. She walked over to the small shelf where she kept her belongings and picked up a bottle of pills. Her fingers trembled as she opened the cap. The silence of the night seemed to scream in her ears. Memories of years of suffering flashed before her eyes. The feeling of failure consumed her. She no longer saw a reason to continue. But just as she was about to bring the pills to her mouth, something inside her hesitated. A small voice, weak but persistent, whispered that she should try one more time. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe her life could change. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and with immense effort placed the bottle back on the shelf. She decided she would try again, just once more. If nothing changed, then she would think about what to. And that seemingly small decision changed her fate forever. The next morning, Mariana woke up with swollen eyes and a heavy soul. Her decision to continue was fragile, hanging by a thin thread of hope. Her body still bore the accumulated exhaustion of years of hard work, but even so, she got up, put on her simple clothes, and went out for a walk before heading to work. The city was as busy as ever, with cars honking and people rushing from one place to another. Mariana walked aimlessly, trying to find a reason to keep going. She felt empty, as if she were merely existing rather than truly living. Then something on the ground caught her attention. A small, crumpled piece of paper lay on the sidewalk. Instinctively, Mariana bent down and picked it up. As she smoothed it out, she realized it was a lottery ticket. It was dirty and worn, probably fallen from someone's pocket without them even noticing. She stared at the ticket for a few seconds, uninterested. After all, she had never been lucky in life. Is this a sign? She thought, quickly dismissing the idea. She didn't believe in those things. Still, without knowing exactly why, she tucked the ticket into her pocket and continued on her way to work. The day at the mansion was like any other, full of humiliation. Mrs. Claudia complained about how Mariana ironed the clothes, saying she needed to be more careful. Mr. Augusto didn't even look her in the eyes when he asked for coffee. The couple's children laughed at her when she accidentally knocked over a glass. Mariana simply lowered her head and carried on with her work. She swallowed her tears, as she did every day. By the end of the afternoon, exhausted, she collected her small salary and went home. As she lay down in her tiny room, she felt something in her pocket. The lottery ticket. She hesitated for a moment, but decided to check the numbers. She turned on the television and waited for the draw to be announced. The numbers started appearing on the screen. The first number matched. The second one, too. Mariana's heart began to race. The third, the fourth, the fifth. They all matched. When the last number was revealed, Mariana held her breath. Her eyes darted between the ticket and the screen, once, twice, 3 times. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She had won. The lost ticket, that dirty piece of paper she had found on the street, was now the ticket that would change her life forever. Mariana couldn't believe her eyes. She kept looking from the ticket to the television and back again. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst from her chest. Her fingers trembled, and she felt her legs go weak, as if they might collapse at any moment. She rushed to the table, grabbed a pen and paper, and wrote down the winning numbers. She checked once, twice, 3 times. There was no mistake. She had really won the lottery. A whirlwind of emotions hit her all at once. Joy, fear, disbelief. Was she dreaming? Was this real? All her life, Mariana had never been lucky. She had always been humiliated, exploited, and invisible. And now, suddenly, she was a millionaire. She sat on the bed, breathless. She needed to think. What would she do now? Her first instinct was to scream with happiness, to run through the streets announcing her luck. But no, she knew she had to be smart. She couldn't tell anyone. The first thing she did was hide the ticket inside an old book tucked away in the back of her closet. Then she grabbed her phone and started researching. She needed to know how to claim the prize. She found out she had to go to the lottery headquarters with her documents and the original ticket. But there was something even more urgent. She needed to leave her job immediately. That night, Mariana barely slept. Adrenaline rushed through her veins and her mind was racing with plans. When the sun rose, she got up with a different feeling. For the first time in years, she felt in control of her own destiny. That day, she didn't go to work. She didn't give any explanations, didn't send any messages. She simply vanished from her employers' lives. She took the little money she had saved and checked into a simple hotel, where she spent the night. The next day she made her way to the lottery headquarters, keeping the ticket safely hidden in her bag. The process was bureaucratic, but when she finally received confirmation that she was the newest millionaire in the country, Mariana felt tears streaming down her face, tears of relief, of victory, of freedom. With the money now in her account, she hired lawyers, financial advisors, and specialists to help her manage her fortune. She didn't want to make mistakes. Her life was about to change completely, and she wanted to make sure she never had to return to that hell again. The first decisions were easy. She bought new clothes, got a fresh haircut, left the cheap hotel, and checked into a place worthy of her new status. She started planning trips, investments, and most importantly, her total disappearance. Donna Claudia, Seu Augusto, and their children would never know what had happened to the humble maid they once despised. At least, not yet. She still had one last plan in mind, and for that she needed to wait for the right moment. In the following days, Mariana vanished completely. No calls, no messages, no explanations. Her employers found her absence odd, but didn't truly care. To them, maids came and went all the time. Surely that ungrateful woman had simply run away from work without notice. Donna Claudia grumbled, annoyed by Mariana's lack of responsibility, complaining about how hard it was to find another discreet and cheap maid. Seu Augusto didn't even bother asking about her. Their spoiled children were only irritated that they had to deal with their own mess until a new maid was hired. What no one imagined was that, at that very moment, Mariana was preparing for a new life. After claiming her prize and organizing her finances, she made some important decisions. The first was to completely disappear from her miserable past. She changed her phone number, closed all her old bank accounts, and opened new ones under the name of a company she created with the help of lawyers. Everything was being handled as securely as possible to ensure no one could trace her newfound wealth. With her new financial identity established, Mariana finally allowed herself to breathe. She spent the first few days in a luxurious hotel, experiencing for the first time the comfort that had always been denied to her. She slept in a soft bed without having to wake up before sunrise to serve anyone. She ordered room service and savored dishes she had only seen on television. Then she began to travel. She visited paradise-like beaches, historic cities, and countries she had never imagined seeing. In each destination, she absorbed the culture, tasted new foods, and looked at herself in the mirror with a sparkle in her eyes that had long been missing. But despite the happiness of finally being free, Mariana knew something was still missing. She didn't just want to disappear from her former employers' lives. She wanted to leave a mark, to prove that luck could turn, that destiny had its own justice. And so she began planning her triumphant return. With the help of a real estate agent, she found exactly what she needed: a luxurious triplex apartment in one of the city's most exclusive buildings. The catch: this triplex was located directly above her former employer's apartment. The thought made her smile. She didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. She didn't want to harm them, expose them, or cause scandals. Her revenge would be silent. The simple fact that she now lived above them, in a superior position, was enough. After months of traveling and planning, she returned to the city and finalized the purchase of the property. Her new home was everything she had ever dreamed of: spacious, luxurious, and equipped with the best that money could buy. Now Mariana was back. But not as the humiliated maid they once knew. She was a different woman, and soon they would find that out in the most unexpected way. Mariana arrived in the city without drawing attention, exactly as she had planned. She didn't want anyone to know she was back just yet. Her new home, the penthouse in the most luxurious building in the area, was already furnished and exquisitely decorated. The same building where her former employers lived, but now she was at the top. When she entered the apartment for the first time, a shiver ran down her spine. She walked to the wide glass balcony from where she had a privileged view of the city. She took a deep breath and smiled. Every detail of that space symbolized her victory. Every piece of furniture, every chandelier, every inch of that place was proof that her life had finally changed. The next day, She began her new routine. She had a private driver, a personal stylist who completely revamped her wardrobe, and a team of staff to take care of the house. The irony of the situation didn't escape her. Now Mariana was the one with employees. One night, while relaxing on her balcony, she noticed movement downstairs. It was her former employers. As always, Donna Claudia was hosting a party. Laughter, loud music, the clinking of glasses. The same people who once treated her as an invisible servant were there, celebrating, completely unaware of their new neighbor's identity. Mariana thought about simply ignoring them, but a better idea came to her. The next evening, she decided to host her own event in her apartment. Nothing overly extravagant, just a cocktail gathering with a few business people and influential figures she had met during her travels. The goal was not to flaunt her wealth, but to make her presence known, to show that she was there and that somehow her life had taken a drastic turn, and it worked. The elegant sounds of her penthouse party caught attention. Downstairs, Donna saw. Claudia frowned upon hearing the chatter and music coming from the apartment above hers. Never before had there been any events on that floor. Curious and slightly irritated, she stepped onto her balcony to try to catch a glimpse of the new neighbor, who dared to be louder than her. But all she could see were shadows and a sophisticated ambiance filled with well-dressed guests. The next morning, in the elevator, Mariana encountered one of the building's longtime doormen. His eyes widened in shock as he recognized her. Before he could say anything, she smiled and raised a finger to her lips, a silent request for secrecy. The man smiled back, understanding the message. The impact she wanted to create was beginning to take shape, but the best part was yet to come. The day her former employers would step into the penthouse and discover, face to face, who the new millionaire of the building was, and Mariana could hardly wait for that moment. The moment Mariana had been waiting for finally arrived. It was a Saturday night, and once again Donna Claudia was hosting one of her noisy parties in the luxurious apartment below. Loud music, exaggerated laughter, champagne glasses clinking. Mariana, who had endured this kind of event countless times as a maid, no longer had to tolerate it. This time she decided to do something different. She dressed in an elegant red gown, perfectly tailored to her figure, and adorned herself with discreet yet sophisticated jewelry. Her hair was flawless, and her makeup accentuated her features with a glow of confidence. She looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. She was unrecognizable. No longer the humble maid they once knew, but a powerful woman, in control of her life and her story. She then took a glass of wine, took a deep breath, and descended one floor. As soon as the elevator door opened, the noise of the party grew louder. The apartment was full of guests, all well-dressed, socializing and laughing. Mariana entered without hurry, walking through the room with steady steps. Some eyes turned toward her, impressed by her presence. And then it finally happened. Donna Claudia saw her. The silence that followed was almost comical. The woman's eyes widened, the glass she was holding trembled in her hand, and her face lost color. The couple's children, who were further back, also stopped when they recognized her. The shock was evident. So Augusto, on the other hand, took a little longer to react. He needed a few seconds to process what he was seeing. But when he realized who the impeccable woman in front of him was, his expression twisted with confusion and disbelief. "Mariana?" Donna Claudia stammered, as if her brain refused to believe it. "Good evening, neighbors," Mariana replied, bringing the glass of wine to her lips with a slight smile. The impact was immediate. Some guests looked at the hosts, waiting for some explanation for the bizarre scene they were witnessing. A clearly wealthy woman being treated with surprise and discomfort by the homeowners. "What are you doing here?" One of the couple's sons asked, his voice laced with disdain yet mixed with evident unease. "I live here," Mariana answered, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "In the triplex, right above you." The shock was complete. Donna Claudia put her hand to her mouth, her eyes watering. So Augusto seemed to lose his breath. The children just blinked, trying to process the revelation. How is this possible?" Claudia finally managed to ask. Mariana took a step forward, looking directly into the eyes of the woman who had humiliated her for years. Fate has a wonderful sense of humor, don't you think? She said with a sweet yet heavily ironic tone. The silence in the room became unbearable. No response came. After all, what could they say? Mariana raised her wine glass in a symbolic toast, smiled, and without saying another word, turned, and slowly walked out of the party. She didn't need anything else. Her presence was already the greatest answer possible. Mariana left the party feeling the weight of years of suffering finally dissipating. The stunned look from her former employers was all she needed to close that chapter of her life. She was no longer a shadow in their home, but an independent, free, and powerful woman. That night, lying in her luxurious bed, Mariana reflected on everything that had happened. Money had brought her comfort, but her true victory was the personal transformation she had undergone. It wasn't the fortune that defined her, but her strength and resilience. And she didn't want to be just a millionaire isolated at the top of a building. She wanted to do something meaningful, something that would have an impact on other people who, like her, had been invisibilized by society. In the following months, Mariana traveled to her hometown and reunited with her family. She helped her mother renovate the house, paid for her nephew's education, and made sure no one would suffer hardships again. But she didn't stop there. She decided to create an institute to help Black and poor women achieve financial independence. She offered vocational courses, legal assistance for domestic workers, and created spaces where other stories like hers could be transformed. The news of her initiative spread quickly. The press began talking about the former domestic worker who became a millionaire and decided to give back to society. Mariana gave interviews, attended events, and became a reference for overcoming adversity. Her name, once ignored by those who humiliated her, was now synonymous with inspiration and change. One afternoon, while coordinating one of the workshops at her institute, she received an unexpected email. It was from Donna Claudia. The message was brief but filled with regret. "Mariana, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I want to say that now I understand the harm I caused. I would like to talk if you allow me." Mariana read those words and smiled, not out of revenge, but because she knew that fate truly had a unique sense of humor. She thought for a moment and decided to reply, "What's past is past. But if you want to understand what it means to be a woman like me in this world, come visit my institute. Maybe then you'll learn something." Days later, Mariana saw Donna Claudia hesitantly arriving at the institute. For the first time, that woman who had always seen her as inferior was there in her space, with her head lowered and without the arrogance she once flaunted. Mariana no longer felt anger, only one certainty: she had won. And her victory wasn't over her employers, but over the system that had tried to imprison her. With a smile on her face, she stood up to welcome the visit. She was ready to move forward, knowing that her journey was much bigger than any bitterness from the past. Now, Mariana was no longer anyone's servant. She was a leader, an inspiration, and above all, the owner of her own destiny. If you've made it this far, like the video, subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates.